The ancient Draxan warship trembled as Chiron cradled the tiny, screaming creature against his armored chest, realizing in that moment that everything he believed about the universe was about to change forever. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I always love chatting with you, and it really helps support the channel. Also, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. The desolate ruins of the human outpost stretched before him, smoke still rising from the debris as his massive scaled wings folded behind his back. The silence of death surrounded them both, except for the persistent cries of this fragile pink being that had somehow survived when nothing else had. Chiron Firescale, veteran guardian of the Draxan Collective, had seen countless battlefields across 17 galactic sectors. His species, often called space dragons by less sophisticated civilizations, were feared across the known universe. Standing 12 feet tall with iridescent scales that shifted between deep crimson and obsidian, Charon's kind possessed natural armor stronger than most battleship hulls. His elongated reptilian face featured 4 glowing amber eyes that could see across multiple light spectrums, and the thermal vents along his spine occasionally released excess heat from his internal fusion metabolism. He had been dispatched to this remote human colony on a routine salvage mission. The Galactic War had ended 3 standard months ago, but its aftermath still scarred countless worlds. The Draxan Collective had maintained neutrality during the conflict between the Terran Alliance and the Centauri Dominion, both sides too insignificant to warrant Draxan intervention. Now, with the fighting over, the Collective was claiming payment for their neutrality by salvaging valuable technology from abandoned battlefields. This human outpost on Epsilon Eridani 4 should have been completely lifeless. According to intelligence reports, the Centauri had bombarded it from orbit before moving on to more strategic targets. Nothing was supposed to have survived. Yet here was this small, pink creature, with wisps of dark hair and surprisingly strong lungs, wrapped in singed fabric embroidered with strange symbols. "How are you alive, little one?" Chiron rumbled, his voice a deep bass that resonated through his armored chest. His translator implant identified the creature as a human infant, approximately 6 months old according to their development cycle, female. The baby's cries softened as she looked up at him, her eyes an unusual blue-green that reminded him of the sacred pools on his homeworld. She reached out a tiny hand toward his face, seemingly unafraid of his alien appearance. A warning ping from his neural interface reminded him of protocol. Non-combatants discovered in war zones were to be transported to the nearest appropriate facility. For a human infant, that would mean a Terran Alliance orphanage on one of their core worlds, already overcrowded with war orphans. Charon's upper left eye twitched, a sign of irritation among his kind. The child would likely languish there, one among millions displaced by the war. The statistical probability of a human infant receiving proper care in such facilities had dropped below 30%, according to recent collective intelligence. Commander Firescale, came the voice of his second-in-command through his neural interface. Survey team has completed preliminary assessment. Nothing of value detected. Awaiting your order to move to the next sector. Chiron looked down at the infant, who had now grasped one of his armored fingers and was attempting to pull it toward her mouth with surprising determination. "Delay that order," he responded. "I've discovered something unexpected." "Sir." "A survivor. A human infant." There was a pause. "Understood, Commander. Shall I prepare for transport to Terran Alliance authorities?" The baby had managed to pull his finger close enough to drool on the polished armor covering his talon. Something shifted in Charon's primary heart, one of the 3 that maintained his massive body. "No," he said finally. "I will handle this personally." "Sir? That's against." "I am well aware of protocol, Lieutenant. Nevertheless, I will take responsibility for this matter. Continue the salvage operation as planned. I'm returning to the ship." Chiron cut the connection before his subordinate could protest further. The Draxan lived by a strict code of honor and duty, one that had guided their civilization for millennia and earned them their respected position as neutral arbiters in galactic affairs. What he was considering went against every regulation. Yet as he looked down at the small being who had somehow survived orbital bombardment, something ancient and primal stirred within him, something older than collective protocols. The Draxen had once been nurturers and protectors before they became warriors and diplomats. Their earliest myths spoke of their ancestors guarding clutches of eggs against prehistoric predators, developing their fire glands and armored scales to protect the next generation. "You are a resilient one," he told the infant, who had given up on eating his finger and was now contentedly examining her own tiny hands. "Perhaps that is why you survived when others did not." His scanner indicated she was malnourished but otherwise healthy, miraculous considering the circumstances. Someone had protected her well during the attack, perhaps hiding her in one of the reinforced emergency shelters his team had discovered. Chiron activated his personal shield, extending it to cover the infant as he made his way back to his shuttle. The blue-white energy field hummed softly, distorting the air around them both. The baby seemed fascinated by the energy pattern, reaching up toward the shimmer with curious fingers. As he walked through the rubble, Karen's enhanced senses picked up details others might miss. A child's toy half buried in ash, the remains of what appeared to be a community gathering space, fragments of art and culture now reduced to debris. The Zentari were thorough in their destruction, leaving little evidence of the lives once lived here. His shuttle waited at the edge of the settlement, its sleek form a stark contrast to the devastation around it. The craft recognized his biosignature and lowered its ramp as he approached. "Computer, activate life support parameters for human infant," he commanded as he entered the cockpit. Acknowledged, the ship's AI responded. However, this vessel is not equipped with appropriate sustenance for human young. Caution is advised. Noted. Set course for the Artaxis station. We will obtain supplies there. That is a considerable deviation from assigned salvage route, Commander. I'm aware. Execute the order. The AI paused, its algorithms no doubt calculating the probability that its commander had been compromised or was experiencing some form of psychological disturbance. But Draxen command codes were absolute, and the ship began pre-flight procedures without further comment. Chiron carefully settled into the pilot's seat, adjusting his posture to accommodate the small being still cradled against his chest. The infant had fallen asleep, apparently lulled by the rhythmic sound of his breathing and the warmth radiating from his scales. As the shuttle lifted off, he looked down at the ruined settlement one last time. According to his mission brief, this colony had been called New Hope, an irony not lost on him as he carried perhaps its only survivor away from the grave of her people. The shuttle broke atmosphere and accelerated toward the jump point that would take them to Artaxis, a trading station frequented by dozens of species, where he could obtain proper supplies without arousing immediate suspicion. What he would do after that remained uncertain. Returning the infant to human authorities was the obvious choice, the correct choice according to collective protocols. Yet something deep within his ancient genetic memory rebelled against this option. Draxen lived for centuries, their lifespans measured in hundreds of standard years. Chiron was considered young among his kind at 143. He had never taken a mate, never considered raising offspring. His life was dedicated to service in the Guardian Corps, protecting Draxen interests across the stars. Yet here he was, contemplating an action that could end his career, possibly result in his exile from the collective, all for a member of a species generally considered primitive and short-lived by his kind. The infant stirred in her sleep, tiny fingers reflexively grasping at his armored scales. The gesture triggered something protective in him, something that transcended rational thought. "Computer, access human developmental requirements. Specifically, infant care." "Accessing," the AI responded. "Human infants require frequent feeding, approximately every 3 to 4 hours, with specialized nutritional formulas or natural maternal sustenance. They require frequent waste elimination assistance, temperature regulation, auditory and visual stimulation for proper neural development, physical contact for psychological health, and extended sleep periods." Can Artaxis Station provide these requirements? Affirmative. The station maintains supplies for all recognized sentient species in the sector, including humans. However, I must note that Commander Firescale has no registered training in xenopediatric care. Chiron rumbled low in his chest, a sound that among his kind indicated determination. "Then I will learn." The jump point loomed ahead, a shimmering distortion in the fabric of space where artificially generated wormholes allowed faster-than-light travel between stabilized points. The shuttle's engines powered up for the transition. Preparing for jump, the AI announced. Estimated arrival at Artaxis Station, 6 standard hours. As the shuttle entered the jump point, reality distorted around them. The infant opened her eyes briefly, seemingly undisturbed by the spatial shift that made many experienced space travelers nauseous. She blinked up at Chiron with those remarkable ocean-colored eyes, then returned to sleep. "You will need a name," he told her softly as the stars streaked past the viewports. "I cannot continue calling you human infant indefinitely." In Draxan culture, names had power and meaning. They were chosen carefully to reflect hope for the future or to honor the past. "Hope," he said after a moment's consideration. "Your colony was called New Hope. Perhaps you are hope incarnate, surviving when all else was destroyed." He paused, considering the human custom of family names. Hope Firescale, a small flame that refused to be extinguished. The name felt right somehow, bridging their two species. Fire was sacred to the Draxan, the element that had shaped their evolution and culture. Artaxis Station appeared exactly as Chiron remembered it, a sprawling structure of interconnected modules and docking arms extending from a central hub, all rotating slowly to generate artificial gravity. Built centuries ago by a now-extinct species, it had become a neutral trading post frequented by merchants, diplomats, and occasionally less reputable individuals from across the sector. Karen's shuttle was granted immediate docking clearance, his Draxan collective identification ensuring priority treatment. Few station administrators would risk offending a member of his species, especially one with military rank. "Commander," the docking control officer's voice came through the comm. "Welcome to Artaxis. Your berth is prepared. Do you require any special accommodations?" "Yes," Chiron replied. "I require access to human infant supplies and information on properly caring for a human child." There was a pause, followed by what sounded like muffled conversation on the other end of the communication. "Understood, Commander," came the reply finally. "We will have appropriate vendors contacted. May I inquire as to the nature of your interest in human childcare?" "No, you may not," Chiron responded firmly. "Simply direct the information to my personal channel." "Of course, Commander. Apologies for the intrusion." The shuttle docked smoothly, magnetic clamps securing it to the station. Chiron gathered the still-sleeping infant carefully in one arm. He considered changing into civilian attire, but decided against it. His military uniform might draw attention, but it would also discourage unwanted questions. As the airlock cycled and the ramp lowered, Chiron activated his personal shield once more. Artaxis was generally safe, but he took no chances with his small charge. The docking bay was bustling with activity, merchants unloading cargo, travelers hurrying to and from ships, maintenance drones buzzing overhead. Several beings paused to stare as Chiron emerged from his shuttle. It wasn't unusual to see a Draxan in this part of space, but one carrying what appeared to be a human infant was certainly noteworthy. A station official, a tall, slender being with 4 arms and pale blue skin, Zendarian, if Chiron recalled correctly, approached him with a datapad. "Commander Firescale," the official greeted him with a respectful bow. "I've taken the liberty of compiling a list of establishments that can provide what you requested. The Central Market has 2 vendors specializing in human goods, and there is a medical facility with xenopediatric capabilities if you require professional consultation." Chiron nodded his appreciation. "The child will need sustenance soon. Direct me to the most efficient source." The official gestured toward one of the main corridors. Level 4, Section C contains a human supply store called Galactic Cradle. They specialize in cross-species adoption and childcare. Chiron raised an eye-ridge at that. Cross-species adoption was uncommon but not unheard of in the aftermath of the war. Many orphan children had been taken in by allied species when no suitable guardians of their own kind could be found. "I am not adopting this child," he felt compelled to clarify. "I am simply ensuring her welfare until proper arrangements can be made." The official's expression remained professionally neutral. "Of course, Commander. Nevertheless, they should have everything you require." Hope began to stir as they made their way through the station's busy corridors. The constant hum of machinery and buzz of conversation seemed to agitate her. Her small face scrunched up in what Chiron recognized as the precursor to crying. Instinctively, he adjusted his hold, cradling her closer to his chest where the steady rhythm of his primary heart might soothe her. His thermal regulation automatically increased to provide more warmth. To his surprise, it worked. The infant settled again, one tiny hand pressed against his armored scales. The store, when they reached it, was exactly as described, a modest establishment with a diverse array of infant and child supplies for various species. The proprietor, a human woman with gray-streaked hair and laugh lines around her eyes, looked up as he ducked his head to enter the doorway designed for beings of more average height. Her eyes widened momentarily at the sight of a Draxan warrior carrying a human baby, but to her credit, she recovered quickly. "Welcome," she said, coming around the counter. "I'm Elaine. How can I help you today?" Chiron straightened to his full height, towering over the human woman. "This infant requires nutrition and other essential supplies. I was informed your establishment could provide these items." Elaine's gaze softened as she looked at Hope. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the child. Chiron hesitated, then carefully extended his arms to allow the woman a closer look without actually transferring the infant to her care. "She appears approximately 6 months old," Elaine observed. "Has she been eating solid foods yet, or still on formula?" "I am not certain," Chiron admitted. "She was recovered from a destroyed colony. There were no survivors to provide this information." Understanding dawned in the woman's eyes, along with something that might have been sympathy. The war had left countless such stories in its wake. "I see," she said quietly. "Then we should start with the basics. Follow me." For the next hour, Chiron received a crash course in human infant care. Elaine selected formula, bottles, and feeding equipment, explaining each item's purpose and use. She added clothing, hygiene supplies, a portable sleeping enclosure, and various items she called developmental toys. "Babies need stimulation," she explained, demonstrating a colorful object with various textures. "It helps their brains develop properly. They learn through all their senses." Chiron absorbed the information with the same intensity he would apply to tactical briefings. His neural interface recorded everything for later review. When Hope began to fuss more insistently, Elaine taught him how to prepare a bottle of formula. Under her guidance, he awkwardly held the tiny container while the infant drank hungrily. "You're a natural," Elaine commented with a smile. Chiron doubted that very much, but he appreciated the encouragement nonetheless. "How long will you be caring for her?" Elaine asked as she packed his purchases. "I am uncertain," he admitted, "until suitable arrangements can be made." Elaine nodded, asking no further questions. She had likely seen many such temporary arrangements during and after the war. "I've included my contact information," she said, handing him a small data chip. "If you have any questions or need advice, you can reach me there. The station's medical center also has pediatric services if you need them." Chiron accepted the chip with a formal nod. "Your assistance is appreciated." As he prepared to leave, purchases secured in storage containers that would be delivered to his shuttle, Elaine added one more item to the collection, a small, soft toy resembling a Draxan, complete with fabric scales and wings. "So she remembers who kept her safe," Elaine explained simply. Something unfamiliar tightened in Karen's chest, an emotion he couldn't immediately identify. He inclined his head in acknowledgement and departed, hope once again secure in the crook of his arm. His neural interface pinged with a notification as they made their way back to the docking bay. It was a message from his second-in-command, marked urgent. "Commander Firescale, Collective High Command has requested a status update on our salvage mission. They specifically inquired about rumors of a survivor recovered from Epsilon Eridani 4. Please advise on how to proceed." Karen's steps faltered momentarily. News traveled faster than he had anticipated. Someone, perhaps one of his own crew, had reported his actions to High Command. Hope gurgled softly, seemingly content after her feeding. She had no conception of the political complications her existence now presented. According to collective law, Chiron was required to report any significant discoveries during salvage operations. A human survivor, even an infant, technically qualified. The proper procedure would be to surrender her to Terran Alliance authorities and file a complete report. But something deep within him rebelled at the thought. The statistical outcomes for war orphans in Alliance care were grim. And there was another concern, one he had only begun to consider during his time on the station. Hope had survived an orbital bombardment that should have killed everyone in the colony. The reinforced shelter where she was found showed signs of unusual energy signatures that his team had been unable to identify. It was possible, though he had no concrete evidence, that she possessed some unique characteristic that had allowed her to survive, something that might make her valuable to various factions still jockeying for position in the war's aftermath. If he reported her officially, that information would become part of the record. She might become a research subject rather than a child in need of protection. Chiron reached the docking bay and boarded his shuttle, mind racing through potential scenarios and their outcomes. As the hatch sealed behind him, he came to a decision. "Computer, set course for the Cygnus Expanse," he commanded. "The Cygnus Expanse is outside collective jurisdiction, Commander," the AI noted. "It is also in the opposite direction of our assigned route. May I request clarification?" "We are taking a detour," Chiron responded firmly. "Priority Alpha override. Authorization Firescale 79 Epsilon." "Override accepted," the AI confirmed after a moment. "Course plotted for Cygnus Expanse. Warning: this action may result in disciplinary review upon return to collective space." "Noted," Chiron said simply. He secured Hope in the makeshift sleeping arrangement he had created from the purchased supplies, ensuring she was comfortable and safe for the journey ahead. The Cygnus Expanse was a region of space known for its neutrality and independence from the major powers. It contained several habitable worlds settled by beings seeking to avoid galactic politics, including a small Draxan enclave established by those who had chosen to live outside collective influence. Among them was Theris Stormwing, a former guardian like himself, who had retired to the Expanse decades ago after a distinguished career. She had been his mentor during his early years in the Corps, teaching him combat techniques and Draxan philosophy. If anyone would understand his current dilemma and perhaps offer guidance, it would be Theris. As the shuttle prepared for jump, Chiron composed a carefully worded response to his second-in-command. "Lieutenant, inform High Command that salvage operations are proceeding as scheduled. Reports of survivors are exaggerated. I am investigating a potentially valuable discovery that requires my personal attention. Will provide full briefing upon return. Continue operations per original directives." Commander Firescale out. It wasn't exactly a lie. Hope was indeed a valuable discovery, though not in the way High Command would interpret the statement. The misdirection would buy him time to determine the right course of action for both himself and the small being now sleeping peacefully in his care. The shuttle entered the jump point, leaving collective space behind. As the stars streaked past the viewport, Chiron watched the sleeping infant, her chest rising and falling with each tiny breath. In her features, he saw both fragility and resilience, contradictions that seemed to define humanity as a species. "Rest well, Hope Firescale," he said softly. "We have a long journey ahead." The shuttle accelerated into the depths of space, carrying them toward an uncertain future. The Cygnus Expanse revealed itself through the viewport as a swirling nebula of purple and gold, cosmic dust illuminated by the light of twin stars. Chiron felt the tension in his massive shoulders ease slightly as the shuttle emerged from the jump point. After 3 days of travel, evading collective patrols and changing course multiple times to avoid detection, they had finally arrived at their destination. The journey had transformed him in ways he hadn't anticipated. "Computer, begin approach to the LOS, Standard Orbit Protocol," Chiron instructed as he gently rocked Hope in his arms. She had just finished another bottle and was contentedly cooing, her tiny fingers grasping at his ceremonial chest medallion, a symbol of his rank in the Guardian Corps. "Acknowledged," the AI responded. "Detecting automated defense grid activation. We are being scanned." "Expected," Chiron replied. He had already prepared for this. "Transmit identification code Ember 779. There was a brief pause. "Scan complete. Access granted. Welcome to the LOS, Commander Firescale." The planet grew larger in the viewport, a world of towering mountains and deep valleys, its surface a tapestry of dark forests and crystalline lakes. Unlike most Draxan settlements with their geometric precision and industrial efficiency, the LOS had been developed with minimal disruption to the natural environment. It was a place where his kind could live closer to their ancestral ways while still enjoying the benefits of advanced technology. "Incoming transmission," the AI announced. A holographic projection appeared above the console, the face of an elder Draxan female, her scales the color of burnished copper streaked with silver, eyes a deep emerald green. Four prominent horns crowned her head, marking her as a member of the ancient lineage. Chiron Firescale, she said, her voice deep and melodious. It has been 17 standard years since you last visited. You always did have a flair for dramatic timing. Minter Theris. He greeted her with formal respect. I apologize for the unannounced arrival. Her gaze sharpened as she noticed the small bundle in his arms. And who is your companion? Chiron shifted slightly, allowing Hope to be visible in the projection. This is Hope. She is under my protection. Theris's eyes widened, all four of them focusing intently on the human infant. A Terran child? Interesting. She paused, studying them both. I assume this visit is not officially sanctioned by the collective. Your assumption is correct. Then we have much to discuss. Theris nodded decisively. Coordinates for landing are being transmitted to your vessel. I will meet you there. The projection disappeared before he could respond. Chiron looked down at Hope, who was now attempting to fit a corner of his medallion into her mouth. She always did prefer the last word, he told the infant. But she is wise beyond even her considerable years. If anyone can help us navigate this situation, it is Theris Stormwing. The shuttle descended through Thalas's atmosphere, following the provided coordinates to a clearing adjacent to what appeared to be a vast compound built into the side of a mountain. The structure blended seamlessly with the natural rock, its few visible sections adorned with intricate carvings that told stories of Draxan history. As the landing gear touched down, Chiron gathered his supplies and secured Hope in a carrier he had fashioned from materials purchased on Artaxis. It allowed him to keep her close to his chest while leaving his arms free, a necessary adaptation as he had quickly learned that caring for an infant required considerably more equipment than he had initially estimated. The shuttle's ramp lowered to reveal Theris waiting below, dressed not in the formal armor of the Guardians, but in simple garments that reflected her retired status. Despite her advanced age, Chiron knew her to be over 600 years old. She stood tall and proud, her posture betraying no weakness. My former student arrives carrying a human child, she observed as he descended the ramp. The universe continues to surprise me. Chiron bowed his head in the traditional gesture of respect between mentor and student. I find myself in an unprecedented situation. Clearly, Theris stepped forward, examining Hope with unconcealed curiosity. The infant, far from being frightened by the presence of another massive reptilian being, reached out toward Theris with evident interest. She shows no fear, Theris noted with approval. Unusual in one so young. She has shown remarkable adaptability, Chiron agreed. And resilience. She survived the destruction of a human colony, the only survivor, as far as I can determine. Theris's expression shifted to one of greater interest. Walk with me, she said, turning toward a path that led away from the landing area and into a forested section of the compound. As they walked, Chiron recounted the events that had brought him to this point. The salvage mission, discovering Hope in the ruins, his decision to take her from the colony, and his growing concerns about returning her to human authorities. Theris listened without interruption, her expression thoughtful. When he had finished, they had reached a garden area where various plants from across the galaxy grew in careful arrangements. She gestured for him to sit on a bench carved from local stone, large enough to accommodate their substantial frames. You have acted against collective protocol, she said finally. It was a statement of fact, not an accusation. Yes. Yet you do not regret this decision. Chiron looked down at Hope, who had fallen asleep during their walk, her small face peaceful against his chest. No, I do not. Theris nodded slowly. The collective's protocols exist for good reasons, Chiron. They have maintained our neutrality and preserved our civilization through countless conflicts. But they are not infallible. She reached out one talon and gently touched Hope's dark hair. Our ancestors were guardians before they were warriors. The first fire was breathed not in battle, but to warm eggs in the ancient nesting grounds when volcanic activity ceased and temperatures fell. It was a story every Draxan child learned, how their species had evolved the ability to generate internal flame originally as a means of nurturing their young, not as a weapon. You believe I am acting in accordance with these older traditions? Chiron asked. I believe you are acting from a place of truth within yourself, Theris replied. Something few have the courage to do when it conflicts with established order. She rose and walked to a nearby pool fed by a small waterfall. However, sentiment alone cannot sustain this child. You must consider practical matters. A human infant requires specific care, education, social interaction with her own kind. The collective will not simply forget your unauthorized detour. I am aware, Chiron acknowledged. I have been researching human developmental requirements. Their physical maturation is rapid compared to our kind, but they require extensive nurturing and education. As for the collective, he paused. I am prepared to face the consequences of my actions. Theris turned back to him, her expression unreadable. Are you prepared to leave the Guardian Corps? To potentially face exile from collective space? These are real possibilities if you persist on this path. The question struck at the heart of Charon's dilemma. The Guardian Corps had been his life for over a century. To leave it would mean abandoning not just his career, but his identity as defined by collective society. He began, then stopped, truly considering the question for the first time. I do not know, he admitted finally. But I know I cannot simply surrender her to an uncertain fate. Theris made a low rumbling sound, the Draxan equivalent of a thoughtful hum. Perhaps there is a third option, one that honors both your commitment to the child and your duties to the collective. What do you propose? You have noted unusual energy readings at the site where you found her. The child survived when no one else did. This suggests something unique about her, something that might be of legitimate scientific interest to the collective. Chiron stiffened. I will not allow her to become a research subject. Theris raised a talon. That is not what I suggest. Rather, what if you were to propose a long-term cultural and scientific exchange? The Terran Alliance has been seeking closer ties with the collective since the war's end. A program that allows this human child to be raised with knowledge of both cultures, under Draxan protection, but with human input regarding her specific needs. A diplomatic arrangement, Chiron said slowly, considering the possibility. With myself as her guardian and cultural liaison. Precisely. The collective values unique perspectives and long-term strategic thinking. A human raised to understand Draxan ways, yet maintaining her connection to her own species, could prove valuable in future relations between our peoples. It was an elegant solution, one that might satisfy collective protocols while allowing him to fulfill the obligation he now felt toward Hope. Yet he could see potential complications. The collective council is pragmatic, but they are also traditionalists, he noted. Such an arrangement would be unprecedented. Indeed, Theris agreed, which is why you will need support from someone with sufficient influence to sway the council. Her eyes gleamed with familiar determination. Someone like a decorated former Guardian commander with 6 centuries of service and familial connections to 3 council members. Chiron felt a surge of hope, an emotion he rarely experienced. You would advocate for this proposal? I retired from the Guardians, Chiron. I did not retire from shaping the future of our species. Theris's mouth curved in what among her kind passed for a smile. The universe presented you with this child for a reason. I am curious to see what comes of it. Hope stirred in her carrier, making small sounds that Chiron had come to recognize as precursors to hunger. With practiced movements, he removed her from the carrier and began preparing a bottle of formula. Theris watched him with evident amusement. You have learned quickly. Necessity is an effective teacher, he replied as he tested the temperature of the formula against his scales, which were sensitive enough to detect subtle variations. Indeed, and you will need to learn much more if you are to raise a human child. Theris rose. You will stay here while we prepare your petition to the council. My compound includes a laboratory where we can properly analyze those energy readings you detected. If we are to present this as a scientific and diplomatic opportunity, we will need evidence. As Hope drank from her bottle, her small hand resting against Charon's armored chest, he felt a sense of rightness that transcended logic or protocol. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever sacrifice might be required, he knew with certainty that he had made the correct choice in bringing her here. Thank you, Mentor, he said formally. Theris inclined her head. Do not thank me yet, former student. We have much work ahead of us. The next several weeks passed in a blur of activity. Chiron divided his time between caring for Hope, whose personality seemed to develop new facets each day, and working with Theris to build their case for the collective council. Analysis of the data from the colony ruins revealed something remarkable. The shelter where Hope had been found contained traces of an experimental human technology designed to create localized phase shifts, essentially moving anything within the field partially out of normal spacetime. The device had apparently been activated during the Zentari bombardment, protecting Hope while everything around her was destroyed. The technology is crude but innovative, Theris observed as they reviewed the findings. Humans continue to surprise with their ingenuity despite their limited lifespans. The device itself had been destroyed in the process, but Hope had been exposed to the field at a crucial developmental stage. Scans showed subtle but distinct alterations in her neural patterns, nothing that would impair her development, but potentially enhancing certain cognitive functions as she matured. She may develop unusual abilities, Theris noted. Perception beyond normal human range, perhaps, or enhanced intuitive understanding of spatial relationships. It is impossible to predict with certainty. This discovery strengthened their proposal. The collective valued unique biological adaptations and technological innovations. A human child with potentially enhanced cognitive abilities, raised under Draxan guidance, could provide valuable insights into both human potential and the effects of phase shift technology. Meanwhile, Hope continued to grow and develop. She had begun attempting to crawl, showing remarkable determination despite frequent failures. Chiron found himself spending hours on the floor of their assigned quarters, encouraging her efforts with a patience he had never known he possessed. "Duh!" she exclaimed one evening, reaching for him as he entered the room after a planning session with Theris. The sound froze him in place. "Did she just?" he asked the human caretaker Theris had arranged to assist with Hope's specific needs. The woman, a retired xenobiologist named Dr. Alara Chun who had settled on the Los years earlier, smiled knowingly. Babies her age start making consonant-vowel combinations. Duh is a common one. She's not necessarily calling you dad yet, but she's associating that sound with you. Something warm and unfamiliar expanded in Karen's chest as Hope continued to reach for him, repeating duh, with evident enthusiasm. He carefully lifted her, still marveling at how small and fragile she seemed in his massive hands. "Hello, little one," he rumbled softly. "Have you been practicing your mobility skills?" "She's quite determined," Dr. Chen reported, "and unusually focused for her age. I've been documenting her developmental milestones compared to standard human parameters. She's advanced in several areas, particularly visual tracking and pattern recognition." Chiron nodded, unsurprised. Their scans had suggested enhanced neural development, particularly in areas related to spatial processing and pattern analysis. Whether this was a result of her exposure to the phase shift field or simply her natural abilities was impossible to determine. "The council representatives will arrive tomorrow," he told Dr. Chun. "Theris believes it best if they observe Hope in her normal environment, rather than in a formal presentation." "A wise approach," the doctor agreed. "Children are most revealing when simply being themselves." That night, as Hope slept in the specially designed crib in his quarters, Chiron found himself watching her with a mixture of wonder and apprehension. Tomorrow would determine not just his future, but hers as well. If the council representatives rejected their proposal, he would face a difficult choice: surrender Hope to human authorities as originally required, or become a permanent exile from his people. Neither option was acceptable. The first would betray the responsibility he had assumed. The second would deprive Hope of the resources and protection the collective could provide. "We have prepared thoroughly," Theris assured him when he expressed these concerns. "Two of the representatives are old allies of mine. The third is younger, more traditional, but not unreasonable. Show them the truth of your commitment to this child and the value of what we propose. That will speak more eloquently than any formal presentation." The collective representatives arrived the following morning. 3 Draxan of varying ages and scale colorations, each wearing the formal insignia of the council. Chiron recognized Sentinel Javon, the youngest, whose obsidian scales gleamed with blue undertones. Elder Marique, whose once bright crimson had faded to a dignified rust color. And Archon Cylindra, one of the oldest living Draxan, her scales an unusual silver white that came only with great age. Theris greeted them with formal ceremony in the main chamber of her compound, where traditional fire basins illuminated ancient Draxan artifacts and modern scientific equipment with equal emphasis, a visual representation of her philosophy that progress must be built upon respect for tradition. "Honored representatives," she began, "I thank you for traveling so far to consider our proposal in person. Commander Firescale is prepared to present our findings and recommendations." Chiron stepped forward, Hope securely held in a specialized carrier that kept her close to his chest while allowing her to see and interact with her surroundings. She was awake and alert, wearing a simple garment of soft blue fabric that complemented her eyes. "Esteemed members of the Collective Council," he began formally, "I present for your consideration a proposed initiative for cultural and scientific exchange between the Draxan Collective and humanity, centered around this child, designated Hope Firescale." Hope, as if on cue, made a happy gurgling sound and reached toward the visitors with evident curiosity rather than fear. "A human infant," Archon Cylindro observed, her ancient eyes examining Hope with interest. "Explain your designation of her with a Draxan family name, Commander." "With respect, Archon, I designated her thus because she has no known human family remaining. Her colony was destroyed in the recent conflict. She survived due to experimental technology that appears to have altered her neural development in potentially significant ways." He proceeded to outline their findings regarding the phase shift technology and Hope's unusual developmental patterns, presenting the data Theris's laboratory had compiled. The representatives listened without interruption, their expressions unreadable to anyone not familiar with subtle Draxan facial cues. Chiron, however, noted signs of interest: the slight forward tilt of Elder Marik's head, the narrowing of Sentinel Javon's secondary eyes. "You propose to raise this human child yourself, within collective space, but with human cultural input," Sentinel Javon summarized when Chiron had finished. "This contradicts numerous protocols regarding interspecies relations and salvage operation procedures. With respect, Sentinel, I propose an exception to those protocols based on unique circumstances," Chiron responded. "The potential scientific and diplomatic benefits outweigh the procedural concerns." "Perhaps," Elder Marik rumbled thoughtfully, "yet we must consider precedent. If we permit this exception, others might claim similar justification for disregarding established protocols. Each case should be evaluated on its specific merits," Theris interjected smoothly. "The combination of factors here, a sole survivor with unusual neural modifications, potential technological insights, and diplomatic opportunities, is unlikely to be replicated." Throughout this exchange, Hope had remained remarkably calm, occasionally vocalizing or reaching toward the colorful insignia on the representative's formal attire. Now, however, she began to show signs of hunger, making the small sounds Chiron had learned to recognize. "Excuse me," he said formally. "The child requires nutrition. With your permission, I will attend to this need." Archon Cylindro waved a talon in assent. "Proceed, Commander. We would observe your caretaking practices." Without hesitation, Chiron prepared a bottle of formula with the efficiency of practice. As he fed Hope, he continued answering questions about her care requirements and developmental progress. The normalcy with which he performed these tasks while maintaining his formal military bearing seemed to make an impression on the representatives. "You have adapted your routines significantly to accommodate this child's needs," Archon Cylindra noted. "Yes, Archon. Human infants require frequent care and specific environmental conditions. I have adjusted accordingly. And you are prepared to continue these adjustments for the duration of her development to adulthood? Human maturation requires approximately 18 standard years." Chiron met the ancient Draxan's gaze steadily. "I am prepared, Archon. I have accepted responsibility for her welfare." Something shifted in Cylindra's expression, a subtle softening around her eyes. "You speak not of duty or protocol, but of responsibility. An interesting distinction. If I may," Dr. Chen stepped forward. "As a human specialist in xenobiology, I can attest that Commander Firescale has shown remarkable aptitude in adapting to Hope's needs. She is thriving under his care, showing all signs of healthy attachment and development, despite the unusual circumstances." The representatives questioned Dr. Chun about human developmental requirements and the potential long-term effects of Draxan caregiving on a human child. Her expert responses, backed by data and observation, added scientific credibility to their proposal. As the formal presentation concluded, Archon Cylindra made an unexpected request. "Commander Firescale, I would speak with you privately. Bring the child." Chiron exchanged a glance with Theris, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. He followed Cylindra to a small meditation garden adjacent to the main chamber. The ancient Draxan settled herself on a stone bench, her silvery scales catching the light of Thalos' sun. "I knew your ancestor, Varric Firescale," she said without preamble. 7 generations ago, during the Nexus conflict. He was much like you, dedicated to duty, yet guided by something deeper. Chiron remained respectfully silent. The connection was unexpected. Few living Draxan could claim to have known his ancestors so many generations removed. He once defied a direct order to abandon a disabled vessel of refugee children. Cylindra continued. He was nearly court-martialed for that decision. Yet those children grew to become some of our most valuable allies in later conflicts. She turned her ancient gaze to Hope, who had fallen asleep after feeding, her small head resting against Karen's armored chest. Sometimes wisdom requires us to look beyond established protocols to see the greater pattern. "You support our proposal, Archon?" Chiron asked carefully. "I have lived long enough to recognize when the universe presents an opportunity disguised as a complication." Cylindra rose with the fluid grace that belied her great age. "The Council will approve your proposal, Commander, with conditions. You will establish residence at the collective embassy on Terra Prime, where the child can have access to both human and Draxan influences. You will submit regular developmental reports and allow periodic evaluations of her progress. And you will accept reassignment from the Guardian Corps to the diplomatic service, with the rank of cultural liaison." It was more than Chiron had dared hope for. Not just permission to continue as Hope's guardian, but an official position that would allow him to remain within collective society while fulfilling that role. "I accept these conditions with gratitude, Archon," he said formally. Cylindra made a sound that might have been a chuckle. "Save your gratitude, Commander. Raising a human child will challenge you in ways combat never has." She reached out one ancient talon and gently touched Hope's sleeping face. "She will test your patience, question your assumptions, and very likely change the course of your life in ways you cannot yet imagine." "I am prepared," Chiron assured her. "No," Cylindra said with unexpected gentleness. "You are not. But you will learn, as all parents must." The word struck Chiron with unexpected force. Parent. He had not thought of himself in those terms, yet the designation fit the role he had assumed. Not just guardian or protector, but parent. One who guides, nurtures, and shapes the development of a young being. "I will endeavor to learn quickly," he said. "See that you do." Cylindra turned to leave, then paused. "One last condition, Commander. The child will retain the name you have given her, Hope Firescale. It is fitting." 5 years later, the Draxan embassy on Terra Prime buzzed with activity as preparations for the annual Cultural Exchange Summit neared completion. In a garden designed to showcase both Terran and Draxan botanical specimens, cultural liaison Chiron Firescale listened patiently as his daughter practiced her presentation. The fundamental principles of Draxan philosophy emphasize harmony between tradition and innovation, Hope declared, her small voice clear and confident despite her youth. At 6 years old, she stood barely to his knee, her dark hair now grown long and braided in a style that incorporated both human fashion and traditional Draxan patterns. These principles are reflected in Draxan architecture, which combines ancient structural elements with advanced materials, she continued, pointing to the holographic model she had created. For example, this ceremonial arch uses traditional forms but incorporates modern stress distribution techniques. Excellent explanation, Chiron commended her. Your pronunciation of the Draxan terms has improved significantly. Hope beamed up at him, her unusual blue-green eyes, unchanged since he had first found her, shining with pride. Teacher Marique says I have a natural ear for languages. Indeed you do. Chiron adjusted the small ceremonial vest she wore, a miniature version of traditional Draxan formal attire, adapted for human comfort and movement. Remember to speak slowly for the human delegates. Many will not be familiar with Draxan cultural concepts. I know, Father, she said with the slight exasperation children often display when reminded of something they consider obvious. Just like you need to remember not to intimidate the new human ambassadors by standing at full height during introductions. Chiron rumbled with amusement. His daughter had developed a keen awareness of cross-species social dynamics, often noticing subtleties that even experienced diplomats missed. The neural modifications detected years ago had manifested not as dramatic abilities, but as enhanced pattern recognition and unusual empathic sensitivity, gifts that made her uniquely suited to her role as a bridge between cultures. Ambassador Chen says we should expect questions about the education program, Hope added, referencing her human co-guardian, the former Dr. Alara Chun, who had accepted a diplomatic position to continue her role in Hope's life. We are prepared for such questions, Chiron assured her. The program they had established, originally designed specifically for Hope, had expanded to include 7 other human children orphaned by the war, all now being raised with both human and Draxan cultural influences. The success of the initiative had exceeded even Archon Cylindra's expectations, creating a new generation of natural diplomats with deep understanding of both species. Hope suddenly looked past him, her face lighting up. Grandmother Theris. Chiron turned to see his former mentor approaching, her copper scales now more silver than red with age, but her posture still proud and her eyes bright with intelligence. Greetings, little flame, Theris said warmly, using the affectionate nickname she had given Hope years earlier. Your father tells me you have prepared an impressive presentation for the summit. Would you like to see it? Hope asked eagerly. Indeed I would. But first, Theris produced a small package from within her ceremonial robes. I have brought something for you. A gift to mark your 6th revolution. Hope accepted the package with appropriate formality, then broke into a very human grin as she unwrapped it to reveal a small replica of a Draxan Guardian combat shield, sized perfectly for her small frame, but crafted with the same attention to detail as a real one. It is beautiful, she exclaimed. Thank you, grandmother. It is functional as well as decorative, Theris explained. The outer edge contains a small repulsor field, nothing dangerous, but sufficient to protect against minor impacts. For your martial arts training. Hope had recently begun studying both human and Draxan combat forms, showing natural aptitude for the disciplined movements and strategic thinking required. Chiron had been pleased but unsurprised. She approached all learning with the same focused determination. What do we say when receiving such a gift? Chiron prompted gently. Hope straightened her posture and recited the traditional Draxan acknowledgement. I accept this gift with honor and pledge to use it with wisdom. Then, unable to maintain the formal demeanor any longer, she hugged Theris's leg, a human gesture the elder Draxan had come to accept with good grace. Run along and show Ambassador Chen your new shield, Theris suggested. I must speak with your father briefly before the reception begins. As Hope darted away, Theris turned to Chiron with a more serious expression. The Zentari delegation arrived early, she informed him. Their ambassador has requested a private meeting with you before the formal proceedings. Chiron stiffened slightly. Relations with the Zentari Dominion had improved since the war's end, but remained complex. Did they state their purpose? Only that it concerns matters of historical reconciliation. I believe it may relate to the colony where Hope was found. It was a subject rarely discussed now, the destruction that had brought Hope into his life. The colony's name, New Hope, had been the inspiration for her given name, but she knew little of her origins beyond the fact that she had been orphaned in the war. As she grew older, those questions would inevitably arise. I will meet with them, Chiron decided. It is time we address this aspect of our shared history. The Zentari ambassador proved to be more conciliatory than expected. Her species, tall, slender beings with reflective skin that shifted colors with their emotions, had undergone significant political reforms since the war. She presented Chiron with recovered data archives from the New Hope colony, including population records that might help identify Hope's birth family. We cannot undo the destruction caused by the previous regime, the ambassador stated formally, her skin rippling with blue tones indicating sincerity. But we can help preserve the truth of what was lost. The child deserves to know her heritage when she is ready. Chiron accepted the data crystal with formal gratitude. This gesture honors those who were lost and those who survived, he responded. It will be preserved until my daughter is prepared to learn of her origins. The The summit proceeded smoothly after that, with Hope's presentation on Draxan architecture receiving enthusiastic response from both human and alien delegates. As Chiron watched her confidently answering questions from beings 5 times her age and many times her size, he felt a profound sense of pride unlike anything he had experienced in his centuries of military service. Later that evening, as he assisted Hope with her bedtime routine, now a well-established ritual involving stories from both human and Draxan traditions, she asked a question that caught him off guard. "Father, Zach from my learning group says I'm not really your daughter because we don't share genetic material. Is that true?" Chiron paused, considering his response carefully. Zach was one of the human children in the expanded cultural exchange program, a boy 2 years older than Hope with a keen intelligence, but sometimes limited understanding of emotional nuance. "In Draxan tradition," he explained, settling beside her bed, "family bonds are formed through both biology and choice. Some of our strongest kinship ties come from what we call flame bonding, a commitment to protect and nurture that transcends genetic relation." Hope nodded thoughtfully. "Like how grandmother Theris is your mentor, not your biological parent, but she's still your family?" "Precisely." Chiron gently adjusted the blanket around her. "When I found you among the stars and chose to become your guardian, we formed a bond recognized by Draxan tradition as a true family connection, different from a biological link, but no less valid or powerful." She seemed satisfied with this explanation, her small face relaxing. "I'm glad you found me," she said simply. "As am I, little one." Chiron touched his forehead briefly to hers in the traditional Draxan gesture of familial affection. "Now rest. Tomorrow brings new challenges." As Hope drifted to sleep, Chiron reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The decision he had made years ago, against all protocol and expectation, had transformed not just his life, but hers, and in smaller ways, the relationship between their species. The small human child who had survived against all odds was now helping to build bridges between worlds. Hope stirred in her sleep, one small hand reaching out. Instinctively, Chiron extended his talon, allowing her fingers to close around it as they had that first day among the ruins of New Hope Colony. The contrast was striking, her soft, pink hand against his armored scale, yet they fit together perfectly, each adapted to the other through years of shared life. In that moment, Chiron understood with perfect clarity what Archon Cylindra had meant years ago. He had not been prepared for this journey, could not have imagined the ways it would change him. Yet he would not trade it for all the certainty and protocol in the collective. Some discoveries, it seemed, were meant to alter the course of one's existence. Some ruins contained not just remnants of the past, but seeds of an unexpected future. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.